Hey folks, Wayne Hall back again with another indie comic you can get at your local shop. And this week I thought, we're in the Easter season, that I would talk about a very unique book that is actually better than I thought it was going to be, which is a funny thing to say. But it's called Second Coming, and it's in the second series of the Second Coming called Only Begotten Son. And the second issue came out, and it's the most recent one. There's a little break before we get more issues. But I thought this would be a great book to talk with for the season that we're into. The Second Son, of course, Second Coming has to do with two characters that are very different. Sun Star, this guy right here, and Jesus, of all things. In the first miniseries, Jesus is basically talking with God, who is an Old Testament God. And interestingly enough, God is unhappy with how Jesus has been doing things. Jesus is basically talking things out and making things peacefully done. And God actually looks down and sees superhero Sunstar and thinks that that's better, a better approach to it. And so what he does is he forces Jesus to become a roommate with Sunstar. Now, of course, any resemblance between Sunstar and Superman is purely coincidental, of course. And in the first miniseries, they get to know each other. And what's interesting is Sunstar actually is more changed by Jesus than Jesus is by Sunstar, which is an interesting thing. Of course, God's not happy with that. By the end of the first miniseries, he comes down and basically decides that he's got to have a talk with Sunstar. And what ends up happening is Sunstar is granted the ability to have a son. That's what this good thing is all about. And of course, Sunstar has his girlfriend, and things start to move along those lines. And the interesting thing that goes along is Jesus is actually looking at how the world is adapting to his message or responding to it. There is a great big, it's interesting because I live in the Orlando area, and down in here, we have a very interesting Bible sort of amusement park, which is an interesting thing. And there's one in here as well. And it's Jesus goes there. See, what's happening is now that the baby is coming, he's looking for other living arrangements because he doesn't feel he should stay there with them. And he ends up going there, and he gets to see how commercialized even that is. He talks with some of the folks, and what they expect out of him and what he expects are two entirely different things, sadly. And he's going to take time to do these things. Now, there's a parallel storyline that's important to know about. There's a guy that is attempting to commit suicide, and he calls the amusement park, and of course they've got all sorts of financial packages of support they could give, which of course is not what he needs. And so he says goodbye to his cat, and he starts to head towards the way to commit suicide. Of course, Jesus is in the biblical amusement park, and they're reenacting his resurrection, and he manages to get in there and say some things that the people aren't necessarily happy with. The one thing about this book that worried me a little was that oftentimes in comic books, when Jesus or other religious figures are in there, they're not well represented. It's kind of nasty, actually, the things that they do to Jesus and anybody who is a biblical or a spiritual person. So I was very worried about how this book was going to work. I interviewed Mark Russell, the writer, and he had some really good things to say about it. He's very faithful and very respectful of Jesus. It's organized religion that he's not nearly so interested in. And that's an interesting way. And that influences a lot of what goes on in this book. This, of course, is the first, and the second book has come out. He looks at religion a little askew, a little askance, because it's not he doesn't feel that the organized religion is living up to what Jesus would have wanted. So it's a very interesting the way he approaches all these things, and the points he makes are actually usually pretty good ones. There's a banner along the sideways that says, "Let Jesus be your quarterback," and he's a little horrified by that because that's not exactly what he had in mind for all this. A lot of attempts by organized religion to make Christianity relevant to people today is a little askance. I like to use that word with this. It's not exactly the way Jesus would have wanted things to happen. So it's an interesting thing about it. The arrival of this other sun. This, of course, is actually Sunstar being sent to Earth on a rocket ship. And so we get there's parallels between Sunstar and the other child coming along. And there's really interesting things happening about it. We get to see in this first issue, we see how he gets sent. The second issue, much less about Sunstar. In fact, we only see Sunstar like on one page of the entire book. The rest of it's all about Jesus and his interaction with this, with the biblical amusement park, and also with the guy who's attempting suicide. So it's a very, very thoughtful approach to this. And what Jesus does, I actually really agree with. I think that Mr. Russell actually does a good job of making this thing work. So again, it's called Second Coming. Only Begotten Son is the second group. I would recommend you get the first collected edition, which is out now and it's Ahoy Comics. So let's get to the grading. The writing is really well done, I have to say. As I said, I talked with Mark Russell about this book, and he gave me a lot of insight as to how he did things or why he did things the way he did. And I think he's done a good job of making Jesus real and relevant, in the sense that what Jesus really was saying is not how the church sometimes interprets him. And he does a good job of telling that story. So I would have to say the writing, where I'm normally really critical of books that talk about Jesus and spiritual people and stuff like that, I think Mr. Russell does a really good job. So I'd have to give an A on the writing. I was a little surprised, to be honest. I thought this was going to be kind of awful, but it's actually quite good. And of course, quick backdrop here, that DC was actually originally going to publish this, and then I think they kind of decided it might be a little controversial, so they didn't. And that's how Ahoy got it. So that's why it's in Ahoy Comics. But I would give writing an A, of course, like I said. The art is a little craggy. I don't know why people decide they have to do this kind of fuzzy looking stuff. And in the second issue in particular, it's not quite up to the par that I would like. So I would give the art a C in this. Then we go to lettering. Lettering, as of course I'm always critical of, lettering is pretty good in this one. I'd give it a C, possibly a B on that. Okay, literary merit. Literary merit is, I think that this is a book that I think is going to really last, and I think people are going to turn to it and really enjoy it even like 10 years from now, because it's got superheroes and it's got religious figures, and it does a lot of commenting on how these things interact with each other. So I like that real well. I would give this book an A as far as literary merit. Fun factor, you kind of have to have a thick hide if you're a religious or spiritual person when you read this book, because he does take some serious pokes at you. But there's still some fun stuff about it, so I would still give it a good B on this. Overall grade, I like this book quite a lot. I think that it's surprisingly good in its approach, and so I would give it a B. I think that a B, maybe even a B plus for this, because I think that, especially like in Easter season, this is a good time to read this book. Again, it's Second Coming, Only Begotten Son. This is the second miniseries of it. So I would highly recommend that you get this, and particularly this time of year, it's a good time to read this, especially when it deals with Jesus and Mark Russell's look at how things are going with that. All right, that's the Second Coming, and until next time, keep reading your comics.